So the syllabus is here as well. If you need to reference. Some of the stuff we just skimmed through. So if you want a more in-depth description or maybe you have a certain question that we didn't talk about in class, more than likely it's in the syllabus. So email me, call me. I'm in my office during these times here. Monday, Wednesday, 1 to 3, Tuesday from 5 to 6. So if I'm not there, leave a message, I'll get back to you. I'm also in the Math Center Tuesdays and Thursdays from 3:30 to 4:30. We'll talk about the Math Center later, but that wouldn't necessarily be a one-on-one thing like office hours could potentially be. Okay, so office hours are for students. We work during office hours, but it's set up for help. So come in. You don't need to make an appointment. You don't need to tell me you're coming. If you want to, that's fine. But I'm there. You're free to stop by for 2 minutes, for the whole time, whatever, if you need help, or just have questions or concerns. Oops. So generally they say, and this is going to vary, but you prepare to spend about 10 to 15 hours per week studying material that we cover in class, and that's going to vary depending on your proclivity towards the material. Some material might come easy, some might not. So it just depends. The best way to do math, I think you all are far enough along in math to where you realize what works for you and what doesn't. But you've got to just do it, right? You might absorb some stuff in class, but you got to do it. So then that requires time. The textbook, you don't need the physical book. We do utilize the access code for MyMathLab Plus. So that's really the only thing that you have to walk away buying is the access code, because you have access to the homework, the quizzes, and the textbook through that code, right? The book and the code are $414.50. If you buy just the access code through Front Range Bookstore, it's $134.50, and buying the access code directly through MML is about $120. So the way that works is in the main page for this course. Access to MML is here. Once you click on that, it'll for most of you it'll say, do you want to buy now or buy later? Okay, so when you click buy now, that's when you'll pay that $120. If you choose to buy later, maybe you're waiting for like financial aid to come in. You've got 14 days to purchase a permanent code for $120. If you took this class before, you shouldn't have to buy a code. If you have issues, if you've taken this class before and have issues, let me know. I can forward that on to someone that can square that away. Okay. So that's where that MML link that I referred to there is located. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about that? Yeah.
Does our Calc 1 code work for Calc 2? Or if we buy a new code? Like if we go to Calc 1?
It should. I tried. I just got online
It does.
earlier today. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, if you're going to buy the book, it's for Calc 1, 2, and 3. We're all on the 3rd edition now.
Are we going to need the MyMathLab code for like homework and stuff?
Yes. Yeah. The MyMathLab code is absolutely necessary if you want to pass. Unless you make 100s on all of your exams. But even if you make 100 on all of your exams and you don't do any homework or any quiz, the best you're going to get is a 70. Because the homework and quiz are 30% grade.
I took Calc 2 up at the Longmont location, so I should have access to MyMathLab already?
I believe it's attached to the textbook, so as long as they use the same textbook, you should be good. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to work out.
All right.
Yeah. So even though it's kind of it's weird like that, but it does. The code follows the book.
Gotcha.
3 months. 3 months.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. He wrote his own Calc 3 book.
Yeah.
It's crazy. All right. Any other questions about that? That's the only 3 legitimate ways to get that code that I know of. If I knew of a cheaper way, I would tell you. I don't really know. So if you buy it from like eBay or Amazon, it's not gonna work. It's gonna say My Math Lab on it, and you're gonna think it's gonna work, but My Math Lab is different than My Math Lab Plus. So My Math Lab Plus is actually embedded into D2L, which is like our education software. So it's very specific. Make sure you get it 1 of 2 or 3 ways.
Just one last thing actually for the book. It won't get you the code, but I was looking around on Reddit a little bit, and there's apparently people that'll have PDFs of whole textbooks that'll just send them to you if you ask. So go around. I'm waiting on a
But
response
that's
right now.
what people, God forbid you steal from big education companies.
Yeah.
That's what's so
Don't
sad.
steal from Pearson. They're billionaires. They're hurting for money. So yeah, this is just, again, there's a couple of places in the syllabus where it says, make sure you don't get it this way. Make sure you get it this way. Okay. An option for the, the temporary access and stuff like that is there. Calculators, no graphing calculator, phones, or really any programmable calculators are permitted on the exam. So you're free to use whatever you want doing homework, quizzes, stuff like that, in-class stuff. But on the exam, know that there are limitations. And I would recommend that whatever you're using to study, do homework, whatever, use that on the exam too. So just whatever you're going to use, be familiar with it. I have people that forget calculators, and then, if I have an extra, I'm totally unfamiliar with it. It just adds to an already stressful situation. So that would be my advice. Desmos and GeoGebra both have phone apps that are really good. So if you want to use those in class, perfectly fine. You just can't use it on an exam. You need internet access. There's another long thing about the My Math Lab access code. The homework notebook is not taken up. This will go too fast. Yeah. A homework notebook is not taken up for a grade, but where is it? Yeah, but item number 6 says homework notebook. It's not taken up for a grade, but you should somehow keep an organization to your online homework, because we don't do any work in class. And so, as some of you may know, there's detriments to doing math homework online. Although you get pretty instant feedback as to whether you got the problem right or wrong, I think there's a tendency to develop bad habits, meaning not showing your work, maybe writing something here and then writing something there and then writing something there, right? It's like very disorganized. So my recommendation is when you're doing your homework, to write out every problem. Just treat it like it were an exam problem, and that way you're already prepared on how you're going to perform on the exam. Okay, I mean, that may seem obvious, I don't know, but I see a lot of exams that are just, they're very disorganized. And some of these problems that we do, or procedures, are kind of lengthy. The more organized you are, the better it's going to be to kind of, you got to refer back to this or back to that, put this back into the problem, right? So please try to maintain something of the sort when you're doing homework. And it also facilitates, like if you have problems, you just don't show your teacher, hey, I don't know how to do this problem, right? You have some work, and they say, oh, well, this is right, but here's where you went wrong, right? So it just facilitates a little bit more efficiently when you have stuff written out as well. Okay, is everyone clear on that? You're only looking at me like, yeah, whatever, we already know this. I don't want to tell anyone how to study. I do have some regrets on how I studied, and so I know there's some people that studied like I studied, and if I can maybe offer an alternative, that's just my intent. It's not to say, hey, you got to do it this way. This is all just required state stuff, outlines of the course, competencies, guaranteed transfer information. Okay. At this point, are there any questions? So there's 3 components to your course grade. Would be your homework online, your quizzes done online, and your exams done in class. We'll talk a little bit more, or look at a little bit more in detail with the homework and quizzes in a moment once we actually get on my math lab. But here explains a little bit of the differences between the homework and quizzes. Again, these things are pretty necessary for most people. Unless you just want to ace every exam and come out with a C, you have to do these. And just to kind of show you, every semester I just see people take it for granted, like, oh, it's too long, I don't want to do homework, I don't have time to do the quiz. Well, 1, it's you're practicing your skills, but 2, it's also contributing to your grade. So I have this grade calculator here. More than likely, it's going to be more useful towards the end of the semester, but, you know, the exams being worth so much too, we always carry anxiety on exam day, right? There's so much pressure to perform, to show somebody you know what you're doing one time, and you only get one time to do that, and that's the vast majority of your grade. So, you know, it seems a little weird and unbalanced. But let's just take a look at a scenario here to where someone makes D's on all of their exams and they even have an F. It's a pretty high F. But you know, the homework and the quiz average here on these top 2 items, can y'all see that all right? It's kind of small. Let me see if I can. I don't think I can make that, well, is that better? So, you know, you make D's and 1 F on your exam. Your homework and quiz averages are pretty low, so you're still failing the course, but, you know, if these things are pretty high, you can already see just an A average, just an A average on these things. So there we go, you've passed the class. 93 homework average, 93 quiz average, and you've got D's on all of your exams. I hope you all want more from this class than that, but at least you can see that it's yeah, the exams are worth a lot, but there are buffers. Okay, and the final exam does replace your lowest exam. So our lowest exam is a 58. Final was a 60. At the end of the semester, this grade gets turned into a 60 as well. So the final replaces your lowest exam grade, if it helps. If it doesn't help, like that's your final, then that's your grade. It's going to stay as a 40. It doesn't affect any of your other exams. Yeah, question?
Is the final a cumulative, or is it just over one second?
The final will be some cumulative stuff and some new material. So our new material consists of 3 sections at the end, and that's in the. So we have 3 exams, and it says a cumulative final, but there is some new material on the final. So instead of doing 4 exams, then turning around, having a review, and then you taking another final exam, I just chose to do it this way. I think that's that last week, taking 2 different exams for one class. That's a lot to ask. It's a lot to grade, frankly. So 3 exams and a final. There's the distribution of each category. And so with this in mind, please know that those are the only 3 things that contribute to your grade. We don't do projects. There aren't any extra credit assignments that you can do to boost your grade. So another reason why doing homework and quizzes should not be taken for granted. Okay. Hopefully none of you are on that cusp, but standard rounding at the end of the semester is applied. So a 69.5 is a C, a 69.4 is a D. And I know it seems nitpicky to have that tenth of a point, but you have to draw the line somewhere. Otherwise, it's like, well, that guy had a 69.4, and this person has a 69.3. It seems kind of unethical not to bump that up too, right? So, just so everyone's clear on the expectations of how grades are reported at the end of the semester, it's just standard rounding. Extensions for homework, quizzes, and exams are not given unless there's emergencies, jury duty, something that you can provide a doctor's note would warrant me, like letting you complete homework assignments and take the exam at a later date. I don't mind if you take an exam early. And generally, I don't open all of the homeworks back up. Even though they're due on the exam day, in theory, you should be getting those things done as we finish. So if exam day rolls around and you're like, hey man, I was in the hospital for 2 days, will you open up all of chapter 6 homework for me? I'm gonna say no. I'll open the last 2 up for you because that's kind of where you should be. The only reason I make the homeworks and quizzes due on exam days like that is just because there are some people that like to do everything all at once to study for the exam, but no, if you do everything all at once, you run the risk of some of those things not getting done, okay? So those due dates and stuff are pretty firm. That being said, there's always exceptions, so I highly recommend and highly respect people that communicate with me early. The earlier you're able to communicate about something going on, I don't need to know the details, I just need to know, like, hey, this something such and such is going on. Can I do this at a later time? Can I get an extension? Whatever, we could probably work something out. But by and large, those due dates are pretty firm. There are exceptions though. Okay, other sources of help outside of myself, office hours, math center, stuff like that. You can actually just go to the math center during any of these hours. Excuse me. And if you're not familiar with the kind of how it works, there's always a facilitator or instructor or someone in there that knows the certain material, not all of it. Just be warned that all of those hours doesn't mean that you'd be able to go in there and get Calc 2 help at any point in time. But you can get help, you can do your homework in there, whatever. You could just go in there as like a safety net, just in case you felt like if I do get stuck, I can ask somebody, right? Yeah, and I think most campus computers actually, you can do your homework on campus computers, okay? Then there's the Academic Success Center. They still do like tutoring. They have tutor lists. If you prefer a one-on-one tutor, you can pay for that service, but it's not free. Mainly what they try to promote is study groups. So if you can get a group of 3 or more people together and agree on a particular time, you can have that ongoing through the rest of the semester. And it would be facilitated by someone who could help you in Calc 2. I just don't know how many of those people there actually are. So if that's something that some of you are able to do, I understand most of you probably do work, which is why you're taking an evening class. But if that's an option for some of you, then feel free to let me know and I can help facilitate that, because you do have to have like signatures and stuff of all parties participating. But it is a good option, kind of as a supplement. Any questions on either of those things? This student rights, responsibilities, and resources. Just show you, I don't know that everyone is familiar with where that's at, but in every D2L shell course, there's the FRCC resources, and down here is your student rights and responsibilities. So, academic integrity, there's counseling services, mental health counseling services, stuff like that. So, in case you're interested, these things are there. Some important dates, and then our schedule. Tentative schedule, anyways. So some people walked in late. Does anyone need a copy of that? Okay. So as you can see, the homework and the quiz, the homeworks and the quiz are due the same day the exam. So they're actually due at 6:30 p.m. So when you come into this class to take the exam, you should have all of your assignments submitted by then, because that's when they're due. These exam dates will be pretty firm. They won't move. So if you've got work stuff, something going on that you know of already on any one of those dates, again, please let me know as soon as you can. So, I just want to also mention that, like I said, the homework and quizzes are due on exam time, because I know some people like to cram. One detriment I've already mentioned is you run the risk of saying, oh, well, I didn't do all of my homework till Thursday the 14th, but something happened, like my power went out and I couldn't do any of my homework. Can you leave them all open for me? The answer is going to be no. So that's one downside of doing all of your homework at once. The other downside is there's legit studies that show it doesn't work as well. If you're cramming, it might be good for like memorizing and getting by, but you're definitely not going to learn as well as if you sort of look at that material piece by piece. Even if you look at it for 15 minutes after class or the next day, that's going to do so much better for you than if you just don't look at it until the day before the exam. So I would recommend that you keep up with that stuff as we finish, or even look ahead and keep looking at that stuff even as we talk about new content, because it's rough in a section where we have so many sections like this third unit to get all the way to 11.4 and then be like, well, I don't even remember what we did in 10.1 because I did that homework like 3 weeks ago, right? So it's always a good idea to keep refreshing and stay on top of that stuff. Otherwise, it stays on top of you, right? It's can be very overwhelming. So that's my advice or recommendation. I think, like I said, at this point, you know what works for you and what doesn't. So if you know stuff doesn't work, then maybe now's the time to change how you do things. Yeah.
So for the exam days, the whole class period is going to be dedicated.
Right. Yep. So the entire class period is the exam, and people always ask, how many questions are on the exam? Which I think is kind of an odd question, because you have 2 hours and 15 minutes to do that, regardless. If there's one question, it's super freaking hard. It's going to take you 2 hours to do it. If there's 30 questions, then they're probably somewhat easier because you have less time to do 30. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know how many questions are on my exams until like right before I write them, which is usually like the week before. But yeah, you do have the whole class period for that. Any other questions about the course schedule? Okay, let me show you my math lab a little. Might not be able to get all the ins and outs, but once you've accessed it temporarily or permanently, you should see this screen. I would recommend, if you haven't had this on your computer before, to run this browser check here. Nope. To run this browser check. And so it'll go through some of the things here in red that you actually need. And then if you don't have it, then it'll prompt you to install. So you use that first to make sure that you have full functionality of the whatever the site or what it has to offer. Okay. All right. Assignments will be here. Due dates and due times again are listed there. So there's 2 places where those due dates and due times are. I always have a few folks that don't do like a quiz or something. They're like, I didn't know we had to do a quiz, but you know, it's in the syllabus. It's right here. Hopefully, there's not any of you not doing quizzes because you just didn't know. Now you know. Let's see. I tried to organize this as best I could. So just be careful because I do have multimedia accompanying each section that we talk about. So the multimedia is like videos or figures or animations, stuff like that, as supplements. But the homeworks are also the blue circles. You just read the title. This is 6.1 homework. So the homeworks are kind of like this open thing. I can start with whatever question I want to start with. I can save my progress. Maybe I have to go to work. I'm almost done. I have to go to work. I'll just save. I'll come back and do this later. You know, if you get it wrong, it'll say, sorry, that's not correct. Try again. If you try again and miss it, it'll say, no, here, the answer was this. Do you, well, usually it says, do you want a similar exercise? This is just multiple parts. So if, you know, like let's say this had 2 parts and you get the second part right, then the score on this question is a 50. If you want to improve that, then you would just say similar exercise and it'll give you a similar exercise, which would then take the place of this if it's better. Okay. So really, they're in theory, it's completely possible and pretty easy if you have the time to get a 100 on all of your homeworks. So 20% of your grade is a 100. In theory, you could do that. You have the ability to print. You can print a single question or the entire assignment. If you print the assignment, you can work it offline and then just come in and enter your answers. And that way, you know, maybe your job's boring and you can do stuff like that at your job. So that would be cool to get paid to do homework with you. So you could do that. The Ask My Instructor just sends me a link of this particular question. If you're going to use that, just try to be as specific as you can. I still have people email me that say, I don't get this. I'm like, well, what part do you not get? Like, what have you done? You know what I mean? Like, so try to be specific if you can. So each section, you can access the textbook through this link, assuming you have the right stuff downloaded and installed. So they're all CDF files which use a CDF player developed by Wolfram. So these will be, I guess the advantage of this is it's interactive. So not only do you have your textbook here, but this one might not have. So this one doesn't have it, but figures have the ability for you to interact with them sometimes, where you can kind of, you know, visually see what's taking place, and again, it's super good for visual learners. So it is like this multimedia textbook, really, but it's section specific if you're going through the homework link. Yeah, any questions at this point? Yeah.
So for the Ask My Instructor, you can like pictures of your work, so that like kind of like explain like words and show you.
Yeah. I don't know that you can actually upload through this, but you can attach.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's accurate. I'm 99% sure.
The worst case, we need to too, right?
Yeah, right. And these top 2 are accompanying homework. Not all homework problems have the help me solve this and view an example. And you know, I would recommend using those as sparingly as you possibly could, because if they're overused, you're not learning. And when you get to the test, you're just kind of stuck, wishing that you had these 2 things, right? So there's a tendency to use those as a crutch. Just don't abuse them. You'll be fine. The help me solve this is more of a prompting type thing. So if you say help me solve this, it'll give you, or it'll pull up the very same problem you're working on, And then somewhere through this, they'll prompt you, choose the correct graph. And before you can continue on and do the other parts of the problem, you'll have to just answer like these intermittent questions to sort of scaffold you through the process. The view an example, however, gives you a different example, but similar, and then you just have the ability to read through how to work that problem. Okay. So again, use those sparingly. When we see a problem and we look at it and we'll have no idea what to do, then I think our automatic response is to go here and say, well, how do I do this? Which is fine in some instances, but if you do that every single time, you're really not thinking about it. And in thinking about something and in struggling with something, I believe you learn more than just knowing how to do it. So just be cautious of those options. They are great tools on one hand, and on the other hand, they can be not so good if you abuse them. Yeah, and so you have really infinitely many attempts until the due date for the homework assignments. I know time's an issue, but again, in theory, you could have all of your homeworks being 100s. The quizzes for my math lab, they're more structured like exams. They're the orange squares. So all quizzes have a time limit on them. And so it'll tell you how much time you have here. You just want to make sure when you're doing a quiz, honestly, it's the last thing you're going to do because the quiz covers the whole unit. There's questions from each section. So that's probably the last thing you want to do or will be able to do. So just make sure you have some chunk of time set out to do a quiz, because halfway through, if you've got to go to work, that's it. You've done half of the quiz. There are 2 attempts for the quiz. The best attempt rather counts for what's entered into the grade book. Okay. So there's no options to save or print or to help. This doesn't give you any direct feedback per question. It's only at the end of the quiz to where then you can go back and see what you missed. Okay. So it's almost like they treat it like a test, but it's a quiz. These are 10% of your grade. Yeah.
I know my math lab is usually pretty finicky, especially on the quizzes. If there's like an obvious typo, like you type a 0 or like an O instead of a 0,
Yeah.
would you be able to like go back and remedy that?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. Yeah, so the syntax on my math lab is picky. If you encounter a situation where you misrounded or you typed a O instead of a 0, you forgot a comma, a bracket, a parenthesis, whatever, just let me know. Unless you just want to redo that problem, maybe it was short. But in most cases, I think it's easier to let me know and just let me look at what you did. If it's warranted, then I'll just give you the points for that. If the answer is like 37 and you put -12 and you're like, oops, hey, I accidentally in -12 and it's 37, clearly you're not going to get points. But it is very picky. Things have to be pretty specific. And I think a lot of times people fail to, because they have this small blueprint right here. It says, simplify your answer, round to the nearest whole number. And oftentimes that's overlooked, which is fine. If you write a half, but they wanted 0.5, just tell me that that's something I can give you points for. Okay. So yeah, I think I've mentioned the highlights of the quizzes. Are there any questions about the homework or the quizzes? So really priority number 1 should be getting onto this, if it's temporary or if it's, through whatever, the $120. Just get on this, mess around. It really is more than just a glorified homework tool. There's study plans. These also, depending on the section you're in, they do have additional practice problems and additional quizzes if you want to supplement what we're doing. So this is just the review. But they have that. Another way to access your textbook is through this multimedia library. You know, you select your section or chapter and section. And then you have these options. Depending on what options you want, you could get just the multimedia textbook portion for 8.7. Sometimes they have videos and animations, not always though. So here's your multimedia textbook for that particular section. So all sections can be accessed that way. There are some lecture videos as well. I'm not sure the quality. They used to be like straight from the 80s. It was awesome. I'm just curious now to see.
I'm Professor Carney, and the topic of this video is additional strategies for integration.
Quality so far.
We have spent some time studying different methods of integration, including
And most of them are
techniques
pretty short
that can
too.
improve the
Okay, that's
exact
more of a
evaluation
flow chart.
model.
But yeah, it looks like they've been
Using a
updated. Videos, any of the interactive figures you would find in the multimedia textbook as well. There's interactive ebook. So that's another way to access the textbook. There's a static ebook. You can go to chapter contents, select a specific section, access the book that way, access the interactive figures, the videos. You can even work on a study plan. So really just mess around with this. There's a lot more available. You might not use all of it, but you know, if you're going to spend $120 on something, you should at least know what's available to you through that. Yeah.
But that $120 gets us full access to the book on the digital form. You just don't need the paper version?
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so no paper version if you go this route. I haven't messed around with tools for success, but you know, there's stuff like graphing calculator manuals, there's projects, you know, all kinds of other challenges for you to do if you want. You know, how do I enter answers? So that's, you know, seems to be the bane of people's existence when it comes to my math lab is just that frustration of, you know, oh, well, the answer was 62, but I put 62 period and it counted it wrong, right? That's frustrating. So, you know, you could even look at some of those things if you needed to. All right. That's kind of that in a nutshell. There are other things on here worth mentioning. So, questions? Okay. Any questions on the course, content, you know, anything? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to take Calc 3 next semester. I won't have to buy another book,
You
right?
shouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah. To my knowledge, we don't plan on changing editions anytime soon, so I think next semester, totally fine. Any other questions? All right. They say wait time is 9 seconds. Ask if people have questions, and then you wait 9 seconds. Seems like a really long time, doesn't it? I feel like someone's staring at you. Okay, well, so if there aren't any questions, feel free to email me if you do think of something that we didn't cover. More than likely I missed something, but I think the major things have been discussed. What we'll do now is we'll take a 10-minute break. I'll come back and call roll, and then we'll start the first section.